In a city engulfed in flames, a young man named Derek gets the signal that it's go time. His partner, Sylvie, briefs him on a rescue mission with ridiculously high stakes. Derek just shrugs off her serious warnings, taking a swig from his mug like it's no big deal. He casually hops off a skyscraper, acting like it's just another day at the office. With a smug grin, he lands and reminds her that he's the hero, thank you very much. Energy courses through him as he gets ready for what should be a quick and easy job. Sylvie, however, is totally over his charmingly arrogant attitude. She summons a wave of purple energy and rips a hole into another dimension. Derek's armor materializes around him, crackling with lightning as he preps for a fight. He strolls into the portal, cockily assuming he'll be back in time for dinner. But on the other side, he finds nothing but fire, ash, and a whole lot of failure. The mission was a complete setup, a nasty trap with odds stacked against them. He stares around in horror, trying to figure out how things went so wrong, so fast. Surrounded by beasts, he desperately shields a teammate who has already fallen. Years down the line, the memory of that disastrous day still haunts him. A much older, scarred Derek thinks back on the mission that was supposed to be a cakewalk. He kicks himself for his old habit of always needing to be the hero. In the memory, his squad is getting wrecked, all of them yelling at him to save himself. They had to make an impossible choice: save their own skin, or go down with their friends. Back then, the younger hero truly thought he was powerful enough to save everyone. Young Derek plows a path through the chaos, dead set on rescuing one last person. His older self can only remember that foolish optimism with a sense of deep regret. He finally reaches a wounded soldier, promising he'll get him out of the firestorm. He supports his injured friend, pushing them both toward the rapidly closing portal. But he knew the promise of safety was a total lie he told to keep them moving. In a sudden, violent moment, his comrade is ripped from his grasp. Derek can only watch helplessly, as his reality is destroyed in a heartbeat. He turns to see his only way out, about to disappear for good. The hero is consumed with regret, questioning every decision he made that day. With no other options, he makes one last, desperate run for the portal's light. He lets out a defiant yell, refusing to accept that this is how it ends. His hand just barely pushes through, reaching for a world he can no longer have. But the gateway slams shut, cutting off his only connection to home. In that single moment, his entire world is shattered beyond repair. He stares at the empty space, his mind unable to comprehend the massive loss. He's trapped in the void with nothing but the lingering memory of his failure. The vivid memory jolts the older Derek awake, leaving him gasping for air. He collapses, drowning in a sea of self-hatred and endless regret. He wonders if he was just too weak, or if he was betrayed from the very beginning. He pushes the thought away, grabbing his weapon like a security blanket. He tries to convince himself that his allies are still out there looking for him. He holds on to hope for a rescue that is definitely never, ever going to come. Even the tally marks he carves into his prison walls eventually fade into nothing. It turns out that endless, mind-numbing solitude is perfect for a training montage. He sharpens his skills until his weapon feels like a part of his own body. He does anything to keep his mind busy, meditating, practicing, training, to avoid breaking. His only motivation is the tiny, flickering hope that he might see the sun again someday. Then, after what feels like an eternity, the silence of his exile is finally broken. A bizarre system alert flashes in front of it. It warns him that the host system is moving out of range. He starts to freak out, realizing that his powers are directly connected to that system. The connection is fizzling out. His only lifeline is being severed. And just like that, the connection to his power system is gone. He pleads with nothing, begging not to lose the only thing he has left. He furiously attacks his prison walls, but the void doesn't even scratch. Now his own life force turns on him, putting him in constant, agonizing pain. The cracks in his sanity widen with every moment that passes. Yet the prison around him remains perfectly, infuriatingly intact. Finally, after ages of pointless struggle, he just gives up completely. He lets the darkness take him, slipping quietly into despair. But after another eternity, the void decided to get in touch. He looks up, pulled from his long misery by a strange new feeling. And for the first time in forever, he responds to the call. A noise echoes through the emptiness, a sharp, cracking sound. He briefly wonders if his mind has finally snapped for good, but the reflection in his own eye confirms that what he's seeing is real. A crack has appeared in his prison wall, and it's not closing. A jolt of power reignites his long-lost will to escape. At this point, he couldn't care less where the path might lead. He smashes the crack with every ounce of strength he has. Anywhere is better than being stuck in this personal hell. But he's not alone on the other side. Something is waiting for him. A massive blast of energy sends him flying violently backward. His one shot at freedom is met with a wall of pure force. He thinks to himself that it definitely didn't feel like a hallucination. Some kind of huge, monstrous creature lets out a terrifying bellow from the other side. He dryly notes that its way of saying hello is a bit on the aggressive side. The beast's eyes are glowing with some seriously evil intentions. So Derek figures it's time to teach this thing some manners. Besides, he's curious to see how strong he is without his system backing him up. He throws himself at the creature, more than ready for a fight. The two of them collide in a chaotic storm of raw energy. He dodges and weaves through its attacks, just barely managing to stay ahead. But the monster's raw power is just too much to handle. He gets thrown back again, the impact sending vibrations through his armor. The beast looms over him, the clear winner of round 1. Okay, now he's positive this isn't some crazy dream. He then notices something he hasn't seen in a very, very long time. For the first time in what feels like forever, he's actually bleeding. He decides it's time to stop holding back and go all out. The sharp sting of pain clears his head, reminding him that he's truly alive. The beast starts charging up another devastating blast of energy. But Derek digs in his heels, ready to counter the attack. After decades of being trapped, there's no way he's backing down now. The monster lets out another sound, completely unimpressed by his defiance. It unleashes a massive wave of energy, a final, all-or-nothing move. Derek flies directly into the center of the destructive blast. He'd pushed past his old limits a very long time ago. The two opposing forces meet in a massive, world-shaking explosion. He screams a challenge at the beast, telling it to either kill him or get out of his way. With one last surge of power, he slices straight through the energy attack. He uses the floating chunks of debris as stepping stones to close the distance. It looks like the old Derek is officially back in business, and with one final decisive strike, he finds his way to freedom. He blows past the stunned beast, leaving it behind in the void for good. He can't help but laugh as he finally sees the sun again. After an eternity trapped in darkness, he is finally truly free. But a little while earlier, in that same forest, things were not going so well. A young boy suddenly realizes he's wandered way too far from home. He starts to panic, misses a step, and takes a long tumble down a steep cliff. He lands with a painful thud, feeling bruised, battered, and completely terrified. He quickly realizes he's trapped at the bottom of a deep ravine. And, of course, it turns out he has some company down there. The boy can only let out a terrified scream as a large beast closes in. He tries to scramble away, but his foot slips on the loose rocks. The creature lunges at him, its sharp claws extended and ready to strike. He falls backward into the water below, desperately crying out for help. He breaks the surface, gasping for air, shocked that he's still in one piece. That's when he looks up and sees a bizarre light streaking across the sky. A massive column of light and energy slams into the water near him. And out of the splash emerges Derek, who lands right in front of the terrified kid. The boy is in disbelief. He can't believe his luck has gotten even worse. He thought escaping a wolf was bad, but now he's face to face with an armored demon. But then a strange system notification pops up in front of Derek's face. It warns him that an invading system has been detected, which means nothing to him. Suddenly, a giant purple vortex rips open the sky above them. Derek is caught in its powerful pull and gets dragged upward against his will. The kid can only stand there and watch, completely stunned into silence. A powerful beam of energy shoots out from the portal in the sky. Derek's grand escape is cut short as he's knocked out cold on the ground. Nearby, the wounded beast from before shakes itself off, apparently ready for round 2. Its glowing eyes lock onto the helpless, unconscious figure. The creature begins to slowly stalk toward its unmoving meal. Derek's unconscious mind drifts back to the endless, empty void. He remembers the feeling of being trapped and having every part of him stripped away. It felt like his very soul was stretched thin and broken into a million pieces. He starts to wonder if his old life was ever even real to begin with. Was his power system, his home, his allies? Was it all just a long dream? Or was this broken, shattered existence the only reality he had ever known? He's snapped back to consciousness by the feeling of the beast dragging him away. He groans and jokingly asks for 5 more minutes of sleep. The creature actually pauses, confused by the fact that its victim isn't scared. Derek just laughs it off, complaining that the monster's grip tickles. The beast has had enough and lets out an infuriated sound. But in that instant, a dangerous new look appears in Derek's eyes. With a sudden burst of strength, he grabs the huge monster by its jaw. He casually flings the beast aside, stunning the boy who's been watching the whole time. Derek gets to his feet and looks around, feeling dazed and totally lost. Then a grin spreads across his face, and he calls the terrifying monster a puppy. He takes a moment to look at his new surroundings, a dying forest full of decay. It's a place where all life seems to give way to rot. But to his fractured mind, he finds it all strangely beautiful. He casually tells his new monstrous friend to quiet down a bit. It slowly begins to sink in that this weird new world is his reality now. He's even more surprised to see that his system interface is back online. But there's a catch. It's been completely wiped, resetting him to level 0. Seeing that his base stats are still there, he hopes his skills are too. He tries to summon a familiar blast of energy, one he's used countless times. But the attack just fizzles into nothing before it even forms. Apparently mashing the skill button over and over doesn't help, either. In fact, every failed attempt sends a jolt of pain through his skull. He remembers the weird error message about an invading system. He wonders if his original power system somehow merged with a new one. Lost in his thoughts, he tries to retrace the steps that brought him here. But the sound of a twig snapping breaks his concentration. Both he and his new beastly companion turn their heads toward the sound. It's the boy from the ravine, who is now on his knees begging for his life. Derek is just completely baffled by how terrified this kid is of him. The boy tearfully asks if the armored man is a demon who eats people. Derek strikes a ridiculous pose, asking the kid what part of his awesome look screams demon. His monstrous companion, on the other hand, looks more than happy to prove the boy right. Derek quickly tells the beast off for having such terrible manners. He introduces himself, and the boy timidly says his name is Thomas. Still calling him Tommy, Derek asks the kid what his power level is. He learns that in this world, people don't unlock their system until they're 13. To activate it, you have to kill a creature first. A cold realization dawns on both Derek and the beast. With a dark smile, he turns to face his one and only companion. And in one quick, brutal movement, he gets his first kill in this new world. The monster lies dead on the ground, its blood soaking into the forest floor. He tries to justify it, telling the kid it was a necessary evil to keep him safe. And with that kill, the system notifications start flooding his vision. He laughs as a familiar feeling of power begins to return to him. But then, a completely different set of alerts grabs his attention. He watches as a conflict between two different power systems plays out in his interface. He figures out that the New World system tried to overwrite his original one, but his old system was stubborn and held on, leaving him with two of them. Right then, a loud stomach grumble cuts through the tense silence. Thomas looks away, totally embarrassed that his hunger is so obvious. Derek asked if the kid was hungry, which was a no-brainer. Thomas eagerly agrees. They quickly get a roaring fire going to cook up their meal. It turns out that Derek's first kill in this world is also his first dinner. He offers the boy a drink to help wash down the monster meat. The kid drinks it down like he hasn't had water in a week. He suddenly stops, realizing he's forgotten his manners completely. Derek starts thinking about how he can get his original, dormant system back online. He comes up with a plan. He'll try buying a similar skill in the new system. The system immediately detects a conflict and starts merging the two skills. The merging process is incredibly painful, sending him into violent convulsions. He tries to play it off like it was nothing, but the pain was clearly intense. The result, however, is a massive, instantaneous upgrade to his skill. He realizes his old skills might not be gone for good after all. They're just lying dormant, being suppressed by the New World system. He now sees a clear path to becoming more powerful than he ever was before. With a new goal in mind, he decides it's time for a new look. Nothing builds trust quite like letting a kid give you a haircut while you walk. He reminds Thomas about their deal. He gets information in exchange for safe passage. The boy reluctantly agrees to keep up his end of the bargain. He starts to lay out all the rules of this strange new world. Thomas says that everyone is taught to be grateful for the system, but he reveals the ugly truth. The world is ruled by a totally corrupt king. The powerful nobles use their positions to make life miserable for the common folk. They've even figured out how to cheat the system to make the gap between rich and poor even wider. His anger grows as he talks about all the injustice he's seen. He reveals that the nobles were the ones responsible for the death of his parents. His hand slips while cutting, and he panics, begging Derek not to hurt him. Derek just jokes that he'll decide his fate after he sees the final haircut. He checks out his new do and jokingly declares that the haircut is good enough to spare the kid's life. The next morning, the sun rises as they continue their journey. Derek gently wakes the boy, letting him know it's time to get moved. They finally reach the edge of a small, grim-looking village. Derek asks the boy which way he needs to go to get home. Thomas points the way, explaining he's from a place called Raina's village. But as he's talking, his eyes lock onto something in the distance. Derek immediately picks up on the sudden, fearful shift in the kid's behavior. Thomas jumps down from his shoulders and sprints in terror toward one of the houses. Derek follows, but the grim sight that greets him stops him in his tracks. The boy smashes through a broken door, yelling out for someone named Mr. Jones. Inside, he finds the man he was looking for, but it's already too late. The villager is lying motionless on the floor. Thomas just stares, his hope completely gone. Derek puts a comforting hand on the devastated boy's shoulder. He learns that the man wasn't related to Thomas, just a kind old guy from the village. Thomas is baffled, saying the man was a powerful level 30. Derek is completely unimpressed, asking if level 30 is supposed to be strong. The boy insists that at that level no creature in the nearby forest could have hurt him. But Derek just leans against the doorframe, a doubtful look on his face. He then drops a bombshell. The wolf he killed earlier was level 53. Thomas is shocked into silence, unable to believe what he's just heard. Derek looks around at the destruction, wondering if this is all that's left of the boy's home. Elsewhere, deep within the forest, a strange energy begins to stir. A glowing green orb pulses with a strange, unnatural power. It quickly gets the attention of a corrupted beast drawn to its energy. A wolf cautiously creeps closer to the weird magical source. The wounds on its body suggest it just barely survived a recent, desperate fight. Driven by pure instinct and hunger, it lunges for the orb, but a skeletal figure suddenly emerges from the shadows to protect the glowing prize. With a single, brutal swing, it smashes the wolf into the ground. The very air seems to vibrate from the sheer display of dark energy. The skeletal creature appears to enjoy its quick and easy victory. It stands tall, revealing itself to be a powerful lich, a true master of this corrupted land. But it wasn't always this way. Not long ago, this land was peaceful and sunny. We see a young girl named Brandy struggling to carry a heavy basket. Her mother, Mallory, gently pokes fun at her for how much she's carrying. Brandy proudly says she's strong enough now that her system is unlocked. Her mother just smiles and pats the head of her daughter, who is clearly struggling. As they walk, Mallory suggests she ask her dad for some leather from his latest hunt. Brandy's eyes light up at the idea of leveling up her leather working skill. Her mother adds that he might even let her help skin the animal this time. The girl's excitement instantly vanishes, replaced by absolute horror. She realizes for the first time what being a leather worker actually involves. The scene flashes back 2 weeks to the day she was supposed to unlock her system. Her father, Travis, presents her with her first ever monster to kill. It's a level 10 fluffy fox. This won't be traumatizing for her at all, surely. She does the deed, but it leaves the poor girl heartbroken and filled with guilt. Her mother tries to comfort her, admitting that her father could have chosen a less adorable target. Their conversation is cut short, as they share a sudden, terrified look. Travis bursts back into the village, badly wounded and shouting a warning. He screams at them to run, telling them the village is under attack. Brandy tries to run to her father's side, but he stops her. He tells her to trust her mother, his eyes full of grim determination. Travis turns back to face the chaos, ordering his family to get out of there. With one last goodbye, he sends them away to find safety. The entire village is up in flames, providing a grim background for their escape. Brandy asks with a trembling voice if her father is going to be okay. Mallory forces a smile and promises her that he and the chief are both strong fighters. They manage to meet up with other survivors being led by the village chief. The chief tries to rally the terrified group, confident they can make it to the next town. Mallory holds her daughter close, trying to offer one last bit of comfort. But she's cut off as a giant, monstrous foot slams down right in front of them. The chief's confident look instantly melts into one of pure terror. A massive, corrupted beast looms over him, its eyes glowing with pure hatred. He's taken down almost immediately, making his confident speech from moments ago seem pretty foolish. Mallory and the others can only watch in horror as their leader is killed. Brandy is frozen to the spot, feeling her entire world fall apart around her. The monster lets out a triumphant sound, its attention now fixed on the remaining survivors. It gets ready to lunge just as Brandy cries out for her mother. Mallory shoves her daughter away, telling her to run for her life. With a final, desperate cry, she orders Brandy to escape. But the young girl is completely paralyzed with fear, unable to move at all. Mallory bravely meets the beast's charge, holding it back with her spear. But she's quickly overwhelmed when more monsters swarm in to join the fight. Pinned to the ground, her only thought is of getting her daughter to safety. She resolves to buy just enough time for Brandy to get away. Brandy finally snaps out of it, running blindly through the forest with tears streaming down her face. Her desperate escape comes to an abrupt end when she runs right into an armored figure. A calm voice from the shadows asks if they could use a hand. It's Derek, with Thomas right behind him yelling that yes, of course they need help. The timing, as always, is perfect. Brandy looks up with a tear-stained face and begs the strangers for help. Brandy grabs onto him, desperately pleading for him to save her mother. She begs him not to let her mother die at the hands of the beasts. Derek calmly replies with a simple, almost uninterested okay. He casually flicks a finger, launching a small bolt of energy forward. The blast instantly vaporizes the monster that was attacking Mallory. She can only stare in total shock as the immediate threat just disappears. He turns to the other survivors, offering to let them finish off the rest for some easy experience points. Mallory yells back that none of them give a damn about experience points right now. With a smirk, Derek decides this situation might actually be fun after all. The remaining corrupted wolves all charge at him in a single, unified pack. But his eyes are cold and focused, ready for the fight. He crushes one wolf's paw under his boot. He effortlessly leaps over another one's snapping jaws. A single blast of energy takes out a third wolf from a distance. His gauntlet begins to glow, forming deadly claws made of pure energy. He becomes a blur of motion, tearing through the pack of monsters with ease. He moves with a speed and grace that none of the villagers have ever witnessed. A final, brutal strike takes out the very last of the creatures. He lands in a shower of crackling blue light, the battle already over. He stands over the fallen wolves, complaining that the fight wasn't fun at all. He's unimpressed, remarking on how ridiculously weak the wolves were. Brandy rushes over to her mother, and the two share a relieved hug. Mallory tries to comfort her daughter, telling her again that her father is strong. But in her heart, she knows her husband is no match for this mysterious stranger. She thanks Derek for saving them but demands to know who he is. He just brushes her off, saying he's taking Thomas home and they're welcome to tag along. Thomas tries to remind him that their village was completely destroyed, but Derek coldly replies that he only promised to get the boy home, nothing more. He adds that their village is probably a lost cause by now anyway. What a great guy. One of the villagers asks if he knows what's wrong with the forest, mentioning a place called Grace Falls. Derek shuts down the question with a simple, bored, no. Thomas desperately tugs on his arm, begging him to go back and help the others. But Derek corrects him, saying that if there's any fighting to be done, we won't be doing it. He makes it crystal clear that if anyone is going to help, it'll be him, and him alone. He reminds the kid of their deal, which definitely did not include saving a bunch of strangers. He asks Thomas if he wants to know the secret to his own survival. A dark memory flashes in his mind as he explains that he never relies on anyone but himself. He learned the hard way that trying to be a hero only leads to trouble. He says that every single tragedy in his life happened because he stuck his nose where it didn't belong. Thomas can only grit his teeth, boiling with frustration. He yells back that someone with Derek's power has a responsibility to help people. Derek just scoffs, completely dismissing the boy's naive idealism. Thomas resorts to uselessly punching the man's armor, which accomplishes nothing. He finally breaks down, screaming that Derek is nothing but a selfish jerk. As the other villagers watch the scene unfold, Derek calmly agrees with the kid's assessment. He explains that in a world where heroes always end up dead, being selfish is the smart move. He effortlessly catches the boy's next punch, putting an end to the tantrum. He tells Thomas that he can go play hero once he's actually strong enough to back it up. The boy glares back at him, his defiant spirit still intact. For a moment, Derek's expression softens, and he playfully ruffles the kid's hair. Then he shocks everyone by lifting Thomas up onto his shoulders. The boy is totally stunned and asks what in the world he thinks he's doing. With a sudden change of heart, Derek announces that they're going to go save the village. Thomas is left completely speechless by the abrupt 180. He stands there amidst the smoldering embers, his world having been turned upside down yet again. Meanwhile, back at the village, Brandy's father Travis is facing off against a giant, corrupted bear. He plants his spear firmly in the ground, his eyes glowing as he prepares for a tough fight. The massive beast bellows, its own eyes burning with the same corrupted energy. Travis meets the bear's charge head-on, the impact creating a powerful shockwave. He stands his ground alone, the last line of defense against an overwhelming force. Derek leads Thomas through the still-burning ruins of the village. He wanted the boy to see the harsh reality of this world, with his own eyes. It was a brutal lesson in what happens when you're not strong enough to protect what's yours. This was never a rescue mission. It was always going to be a recovery. Suddenly, Derek puts an arm out, stopping the boy from going any further. He senses something. A faint groan can be heard coming from under the rubble of a collapsed house. His eyes narrow as he zeroes in on the source of the sound. A survivor, the village chief, is struggling to pull himself out from under the debris. Thomas immediately runs toward him, completely ignoring Derek's warning to stay back. The chief is shocked to see the boy, warning him to get away from the danger. But then his eyes fall on the body of Brandy's father lying nearby. He says the man fought bravely, but his wounds are too severe to survive. In fact, he fears that no one from the village is going to make it out alive. The chief desperately asks if they have a healer, already knowing it's a hopeless question. Derek mentally goes through his options, remembering a rare healing potion he has. But his cynical side wins out, and he refuses to play the hero again. He won't save the dying man, but he decides he can offer them something else. He steps back, giving the family some space to say their final goodbyes. Mallory can only watch the scene, her heart filled with disbelief and sorrow. She clings to her husband, pleading with him not to leave them. With the last of his strength, Travis reaches out for his daughter. He tells her to be strong, and that he'll always love her. And with those final words, the life fades from his eyes for good. Brandy is left kneeling in the dust, her entire world shattered. Her mother's grief-filled cry echoes through the ruined village. Sometime later, the small group has left the burning village behind them. Derek states the obvious, telling everyone it's time to get a move on. But Thomas is still shaken by the tragic death he just witnessed. Derek offers some pretty terrible comfort, telling the kid he'll get used to it eventually. The chief grabs his arm, furious at him for being so callous. He demands to know who Derek is and what he wants with them. The chief questions why he should entrust Thomas's safety to a complete stranger. Derek doesn't say a word, his expression remaining cold and distant. But to everyone's surprise, Thomas steps forward to defend him. He explains to the chief that he understands loss better than anyone. He even admits that he's almost jealous because they at least got to say goodbye. A brief memory shows a much younger Thomas waiting for parents who never came home. The small band of survivors continues their journey, leaving the ruins behind. Derek figures now is as good a time as any to check his system notifications. He sees that he's finally reached level 10, which means he can choose a class. But as he starts scrolling through the available options, his eyes go wide with shock. The choices presented to him are way more powerful than anything he was expecting. The first option is Shadow Brawler, a rare class known for its deadly speed. Next up is Chaos Glade, an epic tier class focused on pure destruction. Then there's Eternal Guardian, another epic class born from fire. He's got some serious analysis paralysis. He struggles to pick one, looking over the incredible powers each one offers. But then he freezes, his breath catching in his throat. He glances over at the chief, a cold sweat breaking out on his forehead. He's trembling as he stares at one final, hidden option on the list. It's called Champion of the Void, an epic class born from his own personal hell. The description claims he can never be trapped in the void again, because he is now a part of it. He remembers the endless emptiness and the gnawing hunger of his former prison. The void was never his ally or teacher. It was a brutal, merciless master. The memory of his own mind breaking apart echoes within him. The void had utterly defeated him, broken him, and consumed him. But in exchange for all that suffering, it was now offering him absolute control over it. He was no longer just its prisoner, he was its chosen champion. A surge of purple energy envelops him as he accepts his new destiny. The power explodes outward from him, forcing the chief, Leon, to pull Thomas back. They can only watch as Derek is consumed by the chaotic, swirling energy of the void. He answers the void's call, fully embracing the new power it offers him. A massive pillar of purple energy shoots up from him, tearing through the sky. Leon shields Thomas from the blast, hoping they survive the chaotic event. The energy finally dies down, revealing a transformed Derek, now the master of the void. He's in awe of the incredible power that is now flowing through his veins. The massive beam of light in the sky acts as a beacon, announcing his transformation. Thomas and Leon can only stare, finding it hard to believe what they've just seen. Elsewhere, the other survivors are startled by the sudden, massive energy surge. The energy slams back down to Earth, flattening what little was left of the area. Derek looks up, realizing his new class apparently came with a freebie. A monstrous void beast begins to take shape from the swirling energy. He can't help but be a little impressed by the creature's dramatic entrance. Leon turns to Thomas, demanding to know where on Earth he found this guy. Mallory and Brandy just watch, completely lost and confused by everything that's happening. Derek is thrilled, realizing he now has his very own summoned creature. The beast slams down to the ground, its sheer size making the earth tremble. He decides on the spot to name it Asher, which seems to get a reaction from the beast. He notes that it's a bit smaller than the last void monster he fought, but it'll have to do. The others watch in terror, seriously questioning Derek's sanity. But Leon realizes with a dawning sense of horror that Derek can actually control the monster. He immediately tries to teach his new giant monster pet to sit. Yeah, good luck with that. The beast responds by violently slamming him into the ground. The impact sends a massive shockwave across the already ruined landscape. Thomas screams out his name as Leon holds him back from the dangerous fight. But an armored hand shoots up from the dust, stopping the beast's attack cold. Derek emerges in his full armor and informs his new pet that their playtime is over. Asher lets out a defiant sound, clearly ready to challenge its new master. Bleeding but determined, Derek yells at the others to get out of there. He summons a blade of pure energy as the survivors run for safety. His identification skill comes up blank, confirming the beast isn't from this world. He thinks back to the last one he fought and realizes this new one is on a whole different level. With absolutely no room for error, he launches himself forward in a blur of purple energy. He dives toward his new pet, ready to teach it a lesson in obedience. The beast lunges with snapping jaws, meeting his attack with pure, raw aggression. Derek counters with a blast of energy, trying to keep the monster at a distance. But he's stunned when the beast just blocks the attack with its open palm. The creature's incredible power immediately puts him on the defensive. Asher unleashes a devastating beam of pure, concentrated void energy. The blast sends him flying, the force of it catching him completely by surprise. He can't wrap his head around how something so huge can move so incredibly fast. Before he even has a chance to recover, the beast is already charging up another attack. The beam carves a huge trench in the ground where he was standing just a moment before. The impact rattles him to his bones. The taste of his own blood is becoming familiar. He collapses to the ground, totally outmatched by the very creature he summoned. He briefly considers playing dead, hoping the monster will just get bored and wander off. Yeah, that's not gonna happen. The beast begins a relentless and brutal assault. A system alert flashes in his vision as his health drops into the critical danger zone. He quickly activates his meditation skill, desperately searching for an opening. Fueled by a surge of adrenaline, he pushes back, his energy blade glowing with power. But Asher simply catches the weapon in its teeth and shatters it into pieces. It swats him away like a fly, his health plummeting with every single blow. Each strike lands like a hammer, pushing him closer and closer to defeat. From the sidelines, Thomas can only watch with tears in his eyes as his new protector is beaten down. Leon urges the others to keep running, knowing there's nothing they can do to help. Asher starts gathering energy for one final, decisive blow. Derek can only watch, knowing he's not fast enough to dodge this one. He realizes his regeneration skills can't possibly outpace the amount of damage he's taking. His health bar is draining rapidly, ticking down to his certain doom. The pressure becomes immense, and his armor starts to crack and break apart. But through all the pain and chaos, his eyes lock onto a single point of focus. He dumps all of his saved-up points into a new skill, triggering another system merge. The process is agonizing, and a scream tears from his throat, but it gives him just enough of a boost to dodge Asher's devastating ground-smashing attack. The skill merge is a success, instantly maxing out his new ability. His pet does not look happy about this sudden turn of events. With his weapon mastery skill now upgraded, the very ground cracks under his newfound power. He's back in the fight, moving as a blur of blue and purple energy. Derek soars through the air, holding a newly formed spear of pure light. His eyes are glowing with renewed determination, the pain all but forgotten. He meets the beast's claws head-on in a desperate struggle for dominance. He pushes with every last ounce of his strength, trying to overpower the monster, but his blade stops dead, unable to break through the creature's tough hide. He realizes the void energy of the beast is simply canceling out his own power. How rude. So he decides it's time to fight fire with fire, or in this case, void with void. He channels the very essence of his old prison into his weapon, imbuing it with void energy. The two forces, master and summon, collide in one final brutal showdown. The resulting explosion tears straight through Asher's defenses. Derek is thrown backward by the sheer power of his own attack. He lands perfectly on his feet, the intense battle finally over. With a tired breath, he admits to himself that the fight was actually pretty fun. As the sun begins to set, he stands victorious over his fallen pet. The system rewards him generously for successfully taming his new friend. In a lavishly decorated room far away, a knock echoes on the door. An attendant enters, carrying an urgent message for his mistress. It's a report from the Crown, detailing the energy signature of a void beast. A woman with red hair finds the news of a monster from another dimension very interesting. The mysterious red-haired woman gives her order with a stone-cold expression. Send a hunter. Meanwhile, the weary group of villagers keeps trudging through the seemingly endless forest. Suddenly, one of the women looks back, her eyes popping wide open in disbelief. Leon and the kids are back. They look like they've been through a meat grinder, but they're alive. The survivors have a tearful reunion, but the happy moment quickly turns into a storm of questions. But the former chief just can't bring himself to tell them the grim truth of what happened. He clenches his jaw, looking like the weight of the world is on his shoulders. A single tear escapes, a silent tribute to the friends and family they lost. Derek decides to rip the band-aid off and lays out the harsh, unfiltered reality of their situation. The remaining villagers just stand there, too stunned to even speak. Leon looks over the bodies of the fallen, completely crushed by his own sense of failure. But Thomas zips right past him, his eyes glued to a familiar armored hero. He smashes into Derek with a huge hug, just so relieved his protector is still in one piece. The kid quickly pulls back, looking embarrassed but still grinning from ear to ear. Derek then turns to Mallory and her daughter, his voice softening up a bit. He tells the grieving widow that he managed to save her husband's body so they can give him a proper burial. Mallory is floored by this totally unexpected act of kindness. She gives him a heartfelt thank you, a tiny spark of light in her overwhelming sadness. He just gives a slight nod, his tough guy mask snapping right back into place. That night, the survivors make camp under a bright full moon. Everyone gets a stern warning to stay near the fire. This forest is not a safe place after dark. Leon takes the first watch, the heavy burden of leadership sitting on him like a sack of bricks. You can see a quiet, grim determination burning in his eyes. Nearby, young Thomas finally asks the question that's been bugging everyone. Derek totally downplays the insane fight, claiming the giant beast just got bored and wandered off. Thomas has a hard time swallowing that story, especially with all the terrifying legends he's heard. Of course, the real battle was way more intense and nearly got him killed. Mallory backs the kid up, pointing out that beating a monster like that is basically impossible. Derek just shrugs, saying he got lucky with a weak summon and that he's never using that skill again. A massive understatement. He says the legends are just overblown stories, much to the disbelief of everyone listening. The next morning, it's Mallory who gets everyone moving again, rallying them to continue their journey. With the sun at their backs, they set off toward the next village, hoping for safety. But a small hand tugging on his own snaps our hero out of his thoughts. It's Brandy, who quietly asks if she can have some of the dead animals he has. She admits she overheard him talking about the creatures he keeps in his magic bracelet. Derek's cool with it and pulls a rabbit out of his inventory with a flash of light. He hands it over, promising her the bigger stuff later as she thanks him profusely. He's curious why she wants them, and she clutches the dead animal with a sad look. A memory flashes by of her father proudly teaching her about the forest. She explains through tears that she picked leatherworking so she could make armor for everyone. The image of her father's proud, smiling face is burned into her memory. She's determined to make sure no one else ever gets hurt because they weren't protected. Hearing this, Derek's cynical heart melts a little, and he tells her she can have all the hides he collected. Meanwhile, at the gate of the next town, a guard who looks like he was born with a stick up his butt taps his fingers, bored. He's actually complaining about being stuck in this town without a proper scented bath. The absolute horror. He looks down at the desperate survivors and tells them they can't come in without the right papers. Mallory is livid and tells the jerk to go find someone named Raina. The guard just smirks, soaking up every second of his little power trip. A villager turns to Leon, begging their old chief to step in and do something. But Leon is a broken man, muttering that he doesn't even feel like a chief anymore. Brandy steps up, pleading with the guard and telling him they've lost everything. He smugly tells them no entry, citing some dumb rule called the Gracefall Decree. That's when Derek has had enough and steps forward, his eyes starting to glow ominously. He asks the guard who, exactly, would be left to enforce that decree if he decided to, break it. Mallory watches nervously, realizing her new acquaintance is about to cross a very dangerous line. The guard, however, seems thrilled at the challenge, eager for a fight to cure his boredom. But Mallory grabs Derek's arm, warning him that killing a noble will just bring an army down on all their heads. The guard scoffs, bummed out that common sense had to ruin his fun for the day. The heavy gates start to close, sealing the survivors out of the village for good. But a new commanding voice from inside calls out, demanding to know what's going on. Two figures step out, a snooty-looking noble named Wallace and the village chief, Reyna. Reyna recognizes Mallory and asks why she's here, mentioning the reports of smoke. After hearing their village is gone, she offers her deepest sympathies and welcomes them in. The chief puts the noble firmly in his place, declaring that the survivors are under her personal protection. With a quiet thank you, Mallory leads her people into what will be their new temporary home. But Reyna gives her a quiet warning. The monsters in this town wear armor, not fur. She glances over at Leon, who looks like he left his soul back in the ashes of his village. Wallace, the noble, is fuming that his authority was so openly ignored. Reyna calmly tells him to finish his business and then get the heck out of her village. He tries to threaten her, mentioning her father, in an attempt to intimidate her. But mentioning family seems to be a sore spot for him too, because he backs down pretty fast. Derek watches them go, figuring his job of protecting Thomas is now officially done. He tells himself he's just sticking around to gather intel. Right, sure you are, buddy. Reyna calls out to the stranger, offering him a place to stay within the village walls. Caught off guard by the kindness, he agrees to hang around a little longer. But as he walks past her, an invisible wave of immense power washes over the village chief. She breaks into a cold sweat, wondering what kind of terrifying aura this guy is putting off. In a cozy house nearby, an elderly couple waits nervously for Reyna's return. The woman, Delilah, is pacing the floor, her patience stretched to its absolute limit. She snaps at her husband, saying she can't relax while her grandson Thomas is still missing. The sound of the door creaking open finally breaks the tense silence. Delilah spins around, demanding to know what could have possibly taken so long. But the words catch in her throat when she sees who came back with Reyna. Thomas sprints into the room, his voice filled with pure, uncontainable joy. His grandmother rushes to meet him, her own tears of relief finally spilling over. The boy closes his eyes, finally feeling safe in her arms. The family is reunited at last, a tiny moment of peace in a world of chaos. Reyna smiles, asking if this was important enough to have kept her waiting. Derek and Thomas share a quiet look, knowing their journey together has reached its end. As the family joyfully catches up, the armored stranger watches from the sidelines like a silent guardian. A little later, the leaders gather to talk about the grim reality of their situation. Reyna turns to Derek, acknowledging that he's the only reason anyone from that group survived. She bows her head in respect, offering him the eternal gratitude of her entire village. Thomas is finally back with his grandparents, enjoying a rare, peaceful family moment. Derek waves off the thanks, telling them to skip the formalities. But Reyna insists, saying it's her duty as chief to honor those who protect her people. Then her tone shifts, her expression hardening as it's time to get down to business. She makes it clear that if he's expecting to get paid, they've got nothing to give. The village's resources are already stretched as thin as they can possibly be, especially with parasites like that noble Wallace draining what little they do. Derek just smirks, asking if she really thinks a guy like him is here for money. He explains that Thomas already paid him back by helping him out when he first arrived. He then pivots to the real issue, the corrupted, monster-filled forest. Reyna leans forward, demanding to know what he's figured out about the threat. Derek says he has a theory, based on how the system worked back in his world. He tells them they're probably dealing with something he calls a dungeon break. He starts explaining how dungeons are the engine that makes the whole system run. They're sources of incredible power, treasure, and of course, a whole lot of danger. Each one is like its own little world, a trial for anyone brave enough to go inside. But when a dungeon is left alone for too long, or the system itself gets wonky, it can literally rupture, spilling all its chaos and monsters out into the world. Its corrupting energy bleeds into the land, twisting and poisoning everything it touches. This, he says, is what destroyed the other village. The village chief is skeptical, but Derek points out that new dungeons can appear out of nowhere. The old man, Richard, chimes in, agreeing that a remote dungeon could easily go undiscovered. The horrifying realization hits him. It's the only theory that actually explains everything. Reyna looks to him for confirmation, and he admits it's the only lead they've got. She then asks the stranger where he's from, hoping for more clues about what they're facing. He totally dodges the question, saying that now that they know the problem, they need a solution. He tries to bail, suggesting the nobles outside can handle the mess. What a guy. But the chief calls out, stopping him in his tracks before he can leave. She admits again that they have nothing to offer him in return for his help, but with a look of sheer desperation, she begs him for his help one more time. Derek lets out a long, dramatic sigh, turns his back, and flatly tells her no. Thomas can only look on, his hope for a hero moment completely deflating. But then Derek calls out to the boy, telling him to tag along. He claims he needs to find Brandy to give her the rest of the animal pelts. And with that flimsy excuse, the two of them make their exit. Richard has to admit, the guy has a point about his own priorities. But Reina just wishes he wasn't so painfully blunt about it. She turns to Leon, asking for his take on their mysterious visitor. She needs to know if this guy is a potential ally or a walking disaster. Leon thinks it over, his expression as grim as ever. He admits that he can't get a read on the guy at all. The chief leans in, sensing there's more to the story. He then casually drops the bombshell that the man can summon and control the void. You know, no big deal. Meanwhile, Derek and his young companion are walking through the village streets. He asks the boy where they might find the aspiring leather worker. A sudden shout from an alley up ahead grabs their attention. They find Brandy in a tug-of-war with a noblewoman over a large animal hide. The woman easily yanks it from the girl's hands with a smug, superior smile. She taunts the kid, daring her to do something about it. Apparently, bullying children is the #1 pastime for the local elites, but her victory lap is cut short when she backs right into Derek. Her arrogant expression instantly evaporates, replaced by pure, unfiltered terror. His eyes are glowing with that same familiar, dangerous light. A sword slams into the ground as Wallace storms onto the scene. He demands justice, furious that a commoner dared to touch one of his people. He threatens Reina, telling her to step aside or deal with the consequences. But the chief stands her ground, refusing to let a brawl break out in her village. She can't believe this newcomer is already causing this much trouble. She's realizing that Leon's warning about him was a massive understatement. Thomas rushes over to comfort Brandy, who's still clutching the stolen pelt. Wallace accepts the unspoken challenge, ready to put this peasant in his place. But Derek catches his wrist with lightning speed, stopping the attack cold. He flings the noble aside, telling him to take the woman and get lost. The armored stranger then announces to the crowd that he was leaving anyway. Thomas is shocked, unable to believe his hero is just going to abandon them. But Derek looks back with a rare smile, promising the kid that he will return. He hands Thomas the clippers, telling him to get some practice in while he's away. With a final stern warning not to unlock his system, the stranger walks away. Wallace scrambles to his feet, enraged, and not ready to let this go. But Derek cuts him off, now surrounded by the noble's easily defeated guards. He gets right in Wallace's face, making sure his next words are perfectly clear. If the noble ever hurts anyone from this village, Derek will personally end him. Wallace's men can only stand there, completely paralyzed by his terrifying presence. The villagers watch him go, a mix of awe and fear in their eyes. A faint aura of purple energy flickers around him, a hint of his true power. Wallace, absolutely furious, orders one of his men to tail him. Derek heads into the forest, recalling an achievement Thomas told him about. He knows he needs a high-level kill, just as a hunter begins stalking him from the trees. The hunter draws his bow, knocking 3 arrows at once like a pro. He takes aim, sure that this peasant target won't have a clue what hit him. But Derek snatches all 3 arrows out of the air between 2 fingers, without even looking back. He checks his system, seeing he needs to find a monster over level 112. His status shows he's only level 11, but he's got a ton of points to spend. His eyes narrow as another arrow comes flying straight for his head. He casually mentions that he's known about his tale for over an hour. He finally spends his points, and the arrow just bounces harmlessly off his head. The system rewards him with 2 new achievements: Jack of All and Meat Shield. He's pumped to see he also got 2 free skills out of the deal. The hunter can only stare in disbelief as his perfect attack completely fizzles. The assassin is floored, unable to process how he could have possibly missed. He brushes it off, figuring his target is just some clueless, lucky fool. He lets another arrow fly, this one powered by sheer overconfidence. But Derek just casually deflects it without even breaking his stride. He finally turns around and asks the hunter if he minds, because he's kind of busy right now. The assassin is so flustered he can barely speak, his whole worldview shattered. With his cover blown, he gets ready to make a quick escape. He makes a desperate leap, aiming for the safety of the treetops. He zips through the forest canopy, wondering what kind of monster he just tried to assassinate. He lands on a branch, thinking he's finally managed to lose his pursuer. But Derek is already there, waiting, still trying to decide on his new skills. The hunter scrambles away in a panic, his escape turning into a desperate chase. Derek keeps up with him without even trying, still rambling on about skill trees. The hunter grabs a branch, trying to swing away and put some distance between them. He lands, getting ready to make one final desperate stand. He unleashes a whole volley of arrows in a last-ditch effort. Derek just stands there and makes fun of him for yelling out the name of his attack. The arrows slam into a nearby tree, causing a massive explosion. The hunter catches his breath, hoping against hope that the attack finally worked. He stares into the cloud of smoke, praying his target is toast. But Derek is just chilling on a branch above him, looking completely and utterly bored. He explains he chose a magic resistance skill, then delivers a swift kick as a counterattack. The hunter, now named Jeffrey, stumbles all the way back to the village gate, totally defeated. A guard calls out, shocked to see the elite assassin looking so battered and broken. Wallace grabs him, demanding to know if he got the job done. With his last breath, Jeffrey admits that he couldn't even put a scratch on the guy. Wallace's arrogant smirk melts into pure, unadulterated rage. He tells his men to pack up and head back to the capital. One of his soldiers actually asks if they're running away. Wallace corrects him with a grim look, saying they're gonna get reinforcements. With his new goal in mind, Derek decides to test out one of his new skills. He spends his time identifying random rocks and trees, grinding out some easy XP, but his boring training session is interrupted by an unexpected woodland creature. It's a level 54 horned rabbit, which is both adorable and surprisingly tough. Derek crouches down and asks the little guy what he's doing in such a dangerous place. The rabbit just stares back, completely unimpressed by his attempt at small talk. He smiles and says he wouldn't hurt it, even if it did meet his level requirement. His kindness is instantly repaid, with a sharp horn to the face. Derek dodges just in time, surprised by the fluffy creature's sudden aggression. He stumbles back, trying to figure out what just happened. The rabbit is now missing its horn, which is firmly embedded in a nearby tree. It shoots a powerful beam of energy, clearly mad about being ignored. The creature lands on its feet, ready for another round of unprovoked violence. It has a look of pure, concentrated rage. For this rabbit, it's personal now. Derek just smirks, finally accepting this ridiculous challenge. The rabbit digs its heels in, getting ready for a full-on assault. With a crack of his knuckles, Derek decides it's time to have a little fun. Another blast of energy shoots out from the tiny creature's single horn. Derek weaves through the attacks like he's done it 1,000 times. He easily snatches the furious little rabbit right out of the air. He holds up the squirming creature, calling it a little daredevil. The rabbit responds by biting down hard on his hand. A system alert pops up, informing him he's taken a whopping 26 damage. He just laughs it off, since the bite barely even left a scratch. But then a cold, sobering thought hits him. An attack like that would have been instantly fatal for a kid like Thomas. He looks down at the tiny, furious ball of rage in his hands. He gently places the rabbit back down on the ground. With a wave, he leaves it behind, deciding it's not worth the effort to fight. The rabbit watches him go, its anger simmering into a silent promise of future revenge. Derek continues his journey, thinking about which new skill he should learn. He weighs his options, a confident smile playing on his lips. The system gives him a choice between 3 different healing skills. Life Leech would heal him in the middle of a fight, a tempting choice for a solo adventurer, but Rejuvenation is a targeted heal, which is a much more flexible option. He thinks about the selfish choice versus the one that could actually help other people. And in a rare moment of selflessness, he makes his decision. He chose the skill not for himself, but for the people he had just walked away from. The realization hits him like a punch to the gut, making him question his own selfish attitude. After an eternity of being alone, he finally found people, only to immediately run away from them. He grits his teeth, frustrated with his own cynical and distrustful nature. He tries to convince himself it's for the best, that his presence is a danger to them. But his eyes show a deep internal conflict that he can no longer ignore. His moment of deep self-reflection is rudely interrupted by a sudden, painful impact. He stumbles backward, wondering what in the world hit him this time. It's the horned rabbit from before, and it looks even angrier than last time. The tiny creature shoots another blast of energy, clearly holding a serious grudge, but their little squabble has attracted some unwanted attention from the shadows. The rabbit, however, seems completely unfazed by the arrival of a new challenger. In a shocking burst of violence, the wolf is taken down with brutal efficiency. The blood-soaked rabbit hops over, completely destroying everything Derek thought he knew about nature. He concludes that this tiny monster is both a psychopath and a complete idiot. It just sits there, a perfect and terrifying combination of cute and deadly. With a shrug, Derek decides to let his new homicidal friend tag along. And so, the bizarre duo begins their journey through the corrupted forest. They make camp for the night, enjoying a rare moment of peace. But peace is boring when you have a rabbit that can also be used as a weapon. He gives his new pet a scratch behind the ears, which it seems to tolerate with pure disdain. As night falls, the two of them rest by the fire. A strange but effective team. But the rabbit's thirst for violence is apparently unquenchable as it leaps back into action. The next morning, Derek stretches, feeling refreshed and ready to continue his journey. He calls out to his tiny, homicidal sidekick, telling it to get a move on. But the rabbit just sits there, its part of the journey apparently finished. Derek turns around, confused by its sudden refusal to follow him. He looks back and sees the creature hasn't budged an inch. He realizes that this is as far as his furry little guide is willing to go. The rabbit stomps its foot, its expression one of pure, stubborn defiance. With a wave, Derek wishes it well, admitting it's probably the toughest thing in the forest anyway. He accepts that their strange, violent partnership had to end at some point. He tries to calm himself, pushing down the familiar, unwelcome feeling of being alone. A vision of the void reminds him that this solitude is a choice he continues to make. He walks on, telling himself over and over that he is alone because he chooses to be. Deeper in the woods, he spots a weird green orb and uses his Identify skill on it. It's a level 100 dungeon that's overflowing and spewing out monsters. He knows he could find his target inside, but the risk of going in is just too high. The deep-seated fear of being trapped in a place like that again is more than enough to stop him. He decides to head back to the village, hoping those annoying nobles have left by now. Calling the whole trip a waste of time, he turns to leave. But a monstrous ghoul bursts out of the ground, blocking his path. Derek just smirks and gives a casual hey to the undead horror. He identifies it as a level 115 ascetic ghoul, which is exactly the high-level kill he needed. He realizes he's been bottling up his frustration and anger for way too long. The beast roars, its aggression a perfect match for his own. And now, he finally has something to unleash all that pent-up rage on. The ghoul lunges forward, a blur of green and black energy. Derek meets its charge head-on, his spear glowing with power. With one powerful swing, he cleanly lops off the creature's arm. He taunts the beast, totally unimpressed by its first move. But he's forced to eat his words as the arm regenerates in a split second. The ghoul's acid spray melts right through his clothes and cloak. It follows up with a massive, sweeping attack of its own. Derek barely manages to block it with what's left of his gear. He's forced to dodge and weave, now on the defensive against the creature. He slides back, admitting the monster is a lot tougher than he expected. But his expression hardens with a cold, familiar determination to win. He summons his full armor, deciding it's time to stop messing around. With a surge of power, he leaps in for a devastating counterattack. He moves like a blur, easily parrying the monster's furious strikes. The two forces clash, his spear holding back the ghoul's powerful arm. He grits his teeth, refusing to give up a single inch of ground. His eyes start to glow with void energy as he charges up his own attack. He unleashes a massive beam of purple light straight at the beast. The blast slams into the ghoul's chest, a perfect, direct hit. But the monster retaliates, bringing its huge claw crashing down on him. Derek scoffs, unimpressed by the creature's supposed high-level power. The acid melts his armor away again, leaving him exposed. He starts to wonder if this is really what passes for strong in this world. He channels his own power, and the void answers his silent call for more. With a crazy grin, he tells the beast not to make him laugh. The ghoul roars back, its long tongue lashing out to meet his energy. The two powers collide in a massive, world-shaking explosion of purple light. The forest around them is torn to shreds by the sheer force of the blast. Derek stands victorious as a flood of system notifications fills his vision. He's gained a bunch of levels and a shiny new achievement. He stands alone in the middle of the wreckage, the tough battle finally over. The ground sizzles with leftover acid, a final reminder of the intense fight. He sits down bummed about the melted state of his favorite armor. He stores it in his inventory, having no idea when he'll get it repaired. He takes off his ruined shirt, regretting not packing a change of clothes. He pulls out a spare tunic, clearly not a fan of the local fashion sense. 2 weeks have passed in Raina's village since Derek took off. Thomas is focused, putting the finishing touches on his latest creation. With one last snip, he declares his masterpiece complete. He holds up the clippers his mentor left him, the tools of his new trade. His first customer checks out the Tom J. Creative. Results in the mirror. He loves it. Thomas is now officially the village's new barber. He offers his services to Brandy, who looks less than thrilled by the idea. She gives him a look that could curdle milk, a very clear and definite no. Thomas wisely decides it's probably best to just drop the subject. He notices Brandy seems down and asks her what's wrong. She admits she's finally used up all the practice materials Derek gave her. She's practiced as much as she can and needs more hides to keep going. Thomas gets it, saying he hopes Derek comes back for his own big day. Brandy brings up his grandpa's attempt to help him unlock his system. But Thomas explains he's waiting for his mentor, just like he promised. He has total faith his friend will find him the perfect first kill. Far away, a cloaked figure arrives at the ruins of Leon's old village. They step into the desolate, ash-covered remains of the settlement. A hand touches the ground, sensing the faint traces of void energy. The hunter confirms a void beast was here, just as the report claimed. But they also sense a second, unfamiliar power signature mixed in. The trail is faint, but it's still strong enough to follow. It leads straight to Raina's village, and so, the hunt begins. Meanwhile, Derek is heading back from the creepy dungeon entrance. He knows clearing out that place is going to be a massive headache. But he suddenly stops, a look of complete surprise on his face. A familiar furry face is sitting on the path, waiting for him. The horned rabbit thumps its foot. Its expression is angry as ever. Derek can't help but crack a smile at his tiny, homicidal stalker. He asks if its persistence is a sign of affection, or if it's just still trying to kill him, which the rabbit immediately confirms. Derek scolds the creature, reminding it of his important promise to Thomas. He warns the rabbit that if it doesn't behave, it'll be dinner. The tiny monster finally seems to understand the seriousness of the situation. He lays down the law. It can tag along, but it's not welcome in the village. The rabbit's demonic glare suggests it doesn't like taking orders. Derek lets out a sigh, already regretting this whole interaction. He sets it down, deciding to just get on with his journey. With a simple command, he leads his new homicidal shadow forward. He figures it's time to give his new, persistent sidekick a proper name. The creature actually seems surprisingly happy about this idea. He rattles off a few generic names while they take a break. but none of them seem to fit its unique personality, a personality that involves taking down monsters 5 times its size. He tries a few more creative options, but nothing feels right. Then, in a flash of inspiration, he gets the perfect name. He kneels down, ready to make it official. He names it Sylvie, after a ghost from a life he can barely remember. With a new name and a new purpose, they continue their journey together. A week later, they finally get close to the village. Holding a small creature, Derek tells Sylvie this is where they split up. He explains that her brand of violent chaos isn't welcome inside. He promises to come back in a few days and tells her to wait. He offers her a parting gift, which she eyes with murderous intent. Derek has a rare, sentimental moment with the tiny, violent creature. Sylvie immediately interrupts it with a powerful and unexpected headbutt. He yells at the tiny psychopath as a nearby tree comes crashing down. He holds up the level 50 chipmunk, now designated as Thomas's first kill. Finally free of his furry stalker, he waves to the guard on the wall. The guard calls out, demanding to know who's approaching the gate. Derek tells him not to bother, planning a much cooler entrance. He leaps over the entire wall in one go, stunning the guard. He lands perfectly on the rampart, much to the guard's surprise. As the man stumbles back in shock, Derek steadies him. He even compliments the guy's haircut, noting Thomas's work is getting known. With another easy leap, he drops down into the village. He calls out for Thomas, announcing his grand return. The boy skids to a halt, almost crashing into another villager. He sprints off toward the voice, pure excitement on his face. Thomas and Brandy both hit him with a barrage of updates. They both eagerly ask about the high-level creature he promised. Derek is a bit overwhelmed and can only give a tired nod. Thomas shoves Brandy aside, declaring he'll be as strong as Derek one day. The two kids look up at him, waiting for his response. He sighs, amused by their non-stop questions. He gives Brandy a new knife and promises more hides for her work. He gives her a new goal, hit level 10 for a special project. He then turns to Thomas, asking if he's ready for his own big test. A little squeak from his bag reveals the special gift he brought. He tells the boy to meet him tomorrow to finally unlock his system. The two kids celebrate, their excitement filling the air. But Derek holds up a finger, adding one last, very important condition. He asks if the village has a tavern. A hero's got to have his priorities. He pushes open the tavern door, ready for a well-earned drink. He takes a deep breath, enjoying the familiar smell of a pub. He walks in, hoping this world has something better than warm ale. A small smile crosses his face. He feels right at home, but he bumps right into a cloaked figure, totally caught off guard. When he touches their arm, he feels a familiar, dangerous energy. The hunter's eyes see a targeting reticle, confirming he's found his mark. Derek asks who the guy is, sensing this is no ordinary noble. The hunter reveals Derek is the source of the energy he's been tracking. But he realizes this man isn't the void beast he was sent to find. Derek confirms he's not a beast, so the hunter demands to know why he smells like the void. Annoyed, Derek plays dumb, hoping to avoid another public spectacle. The hunter starts grilling him with questions, but Derek stays evasive. Losing his patience, the hunter accuses him of lying. He reaches out, trying to force an answer out of the stranger. But Derek catches his wrist with lightning speed, stopping him cold. The two men lock eyes in a silent, tense standoff. The hunter decides he'll get his answers another way. He activates his quote, identify skill, trying to read Derek's stats. But the system just spits back an error, leaving them both stunned. Well, this is awkward. Derek breaks the silence, asking if he can finally get that beer now. He takes a seat at the bar, and the bartender greets him by name. The hunter watches, realizing Derek must be the one who took down the beast. He slips out the door as Derek orders a drink from the bartender, Bart. Derek breathes a sigh of relief, glad the confrontation didn't escalate. But his good mood vanishes when he remembers he's broke. He offers a high-level pelt as payment instead, and Bart's eyes light up. Just then, another person steps into the tavern. Derek turns, wondering who could possibly be looking for him now. It's Mallory, who says Brandy sent her with an invitation. She invites him to have dinner with their family as a thank you. The two of them walk through the village, drinks in hand. Mallory asks about the mysterious hunter, but Derek brushes it off. She warns him that the man works for a group called The Crown. Derek takes a sip, figuring she means the kingdom's royal army. But she explains the Crown is a powerful, independent organization. She says they hold a massive amount of power and influence. Only the super rich are ever allowed to dine in their halls. And she asks if he knows what their most prized delicacy is. It's the meat of a void beast. Derek nearly chokes, horrified to learn they eat creatures like his old pet. Eating one supposedly grants a fast track to the top. He scoffs, assuming there must be weaker versions of the beasts out there. She reminds him of how ridiculously rare they are, born from the feared and mysterious void. A memory of pure destruction flashes in his mind, a grim reminder of their insane power. Mallory gives him a sharp look. She knows he understands this better than most. Derek can't quite hide his discomfort, his big secret now dangerously close to being outed. He tries to play it cool as they continue their walk back to her family's home. They arrive at a house filled with the warm, happy sounds of a family dinner. Our hero gets to enjoy a home-cooked meal for the first time in what feels like a century. He declares it's the best thing he's eaten in years, but after a diet of void monster jerky, that's not a high bar. Mallory humbly brushes it off, saying her cooking skill is actually pretty low level. Richard chimes in to agree, which earns him a death glare from his wife. Thomas eagerly asks if they're still on for him to unlock his system tomorrow. Derek confirms it, as long as his grandparents are cool with it. The boy turns to them with puppy dog eyes, and they happily give their blessing. Thomas erupts in celebration, his lifelong dream finally about to come true. But the armored stranger holds up a finger, adding one final condition. All he wants in return is a nice warm bath after his long and dirty journey. Thomas sprints off immediately, more than happy to get it ready for him. The adults share a laugh, enjoying the kid's boundless energy. Derek glances out the window, his reflection looking like a ghost from another life. A small poke from Brandy snaps him out of his thoughts. She shyly says that she has a little gift for him. She offers him a small, handcrafted leather charm as a thank you present. The young girl explains that working on it helped her deal with the loss of her father. He accepts the thoughtful gift with a rare, genuine smile. The house is filled with the warmth of family, laughter, and easy chatter. For the first time in an eternity, he doesn't feel completely and utterly alone. It feels like maybe, just maybe, he's finally escaped the void for good. The next morning, he leaps from the village wall with Thomas clinging to his back. The boy hangs on for dear life, feeling a mix of pure terror and wild excitement. Derek lands without a scratch, declaring this a good spot for a life-altering event. He sets the dizzy kid down on the ground, a serious look in his eyes. Thomas's face is lit up with pure joy, ready to finally unlock his potential. His mentor hands him a beautifully crafted dagger, a special tool for his first test. He reaches into his bag, about to reveal the boy's first official target. With a smirk, he gives a simple, chilling order: kill it. Thomas grips the blade, his resolve hardening as he gets ready for the task. A pillar of light erupts from the ground as the system officially welcomes its newest member. Derek casually takes back the knife, asking the kid how it feels to finally level up. The boy is in total shock, having just one shot at a monster that was over level 50. His mentor reveals that the special dagger is a masterpiece, capable of doing the impossible. But before they celebrate, he has a very important question to ask. He knows Thomas wants to leave the village to get stronger than he ever could here. He admits that flying solo is getting pretty old and asks the boy to join him. Thomas just stares at him, unable to believe the offer is real. His mind starts racing with all the possibilities of a grand adventure. He tries to play it cool, but his excitement is written all over his face. Derek smiles but lays down the first of his many conditions. Thomas swears he'll protect all his secrets, maybe a little too dramatically. The second rule: he has to learn to rely on himself, not even on his powerful master. And the third most important rule of all: absolute, unquestioning obedience. The kid hesitates for a second, the weight of that last promise finally sinking in. His new master reassures him he's not an evil guy, just not exactly a good guy either. With his spirit for adventure reignited, Thomas accepts the terms, ready for whatever comes next. With a firm handshake, Derek officially welcomes his new apprentice to the team. Their first training session kicks off with a simple question about where to spend skill points. His new master informs him that he's about to waste most of them. So much for creative freedom. Thomas reluctantly does, as he's told, picking his first two skills. His mentor explains that these super boring skills are the key to not dying. But the boy can't help but feel a little disappointed by his new powers. The armored stranger offers him one last point to spend on something a bit more fun. The kid wants to be a stealthy warrior, and his master has the perfect skill in mind. With a single touch, the new apprentice locks in his final choice. His master then instructs him to dump all his remaining stat points into defense. The boy's hopes of getting a piggyback ride back to the village are about to be completely crushed. Derek takes off in a blur of speed, leaving his new student in the dust. He yells that it's a race back to the village and that the kid's training has officially begun. Back at the house, Thomas collapses on the floor, totally wiped out from the run. Meanwhile, the village leaders are having a very grim meeting. Reina knows that sending the wrong team to deal with the dungeon would be a suicide mission. Derek listens in, his expression hardening as he understands the gravity of their situation. She lays out her plan, but he questions if it'll be anywhere near enough. He then drops the bomb that the dungeon he found is a terrifying level 100. The news sends a wave of absolute shock and disbelief through the room. Leon realizes that their best silver-ranked adventurers would be walking straight into a slaughterhouse. They'd need gold-ranked heroes for a threat like that. Derek asks for a map of the region. Thomas, ever the eager apprentice, sprints off to go and get it for him. The chief lays out the map, pointing out the locations of all the known dungeons. A close-up reveals the details of a much weaker, level 25 dungeon not too far away. Derek points to a spot deep in the forest, showing them the source of the corruption. He asks for permission to add his new discovery to their official map. He marks the location of the new threat, then asks if he can make a copy for himself. As he hands the copy over, he asks the village chief a very direct question. He calls her out on her surprisingly low level, and she explains it's because of her rare class. She says her duties as the chief don't leave her any time to go out and level up. Besides, their village's weapons are practically useless against the stronger monsters. A close-up shows a chipped and worn-out sword, a relic from many past battles. But Derek suddenly tosses her a brand new sword, catching her completely by surprise. He invites her to train alongside him and Thomas, much to the young boy's shock. If she agrees to the training, the incredible blade is hers to keep. A pretty sweet deal. She examines the weapon, stunned by its flawless, master-level quality. With a nod of grim determination, she accepts his unexpected offer. Derek heads out, announcing he's going to visit his new best friend, the bartender. Elsewhere, Wallace is on his knees begging his father for reinforcements. But his dad is not impressed, questioning his son's pathetic little crusade. He brings up the fact that the village requested help for a problem Wallace failed to solve. He refuses to be embarrassed by his son again and tells him to go clean up his own mess. Wallace tries to argue, but his protest is immediately shut down. With a single, dismissive word, his father kicks him out of the room. Wallace can only grit his teeth, his pride totally shattered. He turns to leave, his humiliation burning with every step. But he stops at the door, vowing to himself that he will, in fact, deal with them personally. Chief Reyna looked suspiciously at Derek, wondering if his new training plan was actually just a terrible idea. Derek stood shirtless, cheerfully inviting her to attack him with everything she had, which seemed perfectly safe. He gave her a charming smile, asking her to just trust his completely insane idea. Derek explained he'd rather ruin old shorts than another shirt, a man with clear priorities. Reyna agreed, gathering crackling blue energy around her new sword with a very determined look. She decided to hold back slightly, not wanting to accidentally vaporize her new ally just yet. A wave of energy flew toward Derek, who seemed entirely unconcerned about his impending doom. Thomas immediately began to question all of his recent life choices as he watched the training begin. The powerful energy slash struck Derek's chest in a brilliant and probably painful explosion. Thomas's terror turned to awe, while Reyna realized she was fighting an absolute monster. Derek casually brushed off the hit, asking her to please try a little harder next time. Reyna's expression hardened. She was done worrying about scratching the man's perfect abs. Promising not to hold back, she gathered an even more immense power for her next attack. After many attacks, Reyna finally collapsed from sheer exhaustion, having completely run out of it. While Reyna recovered, Derek turned his attention to his other student, calling for Thomas. Thomas saluted enthusiastically, dropping his sword in his haste to seem competent and ready for orders. Derek told him to pick a weapon, and then try his very best to murder him. Standard first lesson. Thomas was understandably horrified by the casual suggestion that he should try to kill his new mentor. Derek sighed, asking if Thomas seriously thought his puny strength could actually hurt him. Good point. Thomas understood the lesson. His very important new job was to kill the unkillable man. Easy enough. As Thomas grabbed a sword, Derek casually tossed some rocks to test his apparently poor focus. The boy charged forward with a mighty yell, full of spirit and completely lacking any real skill. Derek easily sidestepped the attack, barely moving as Thomas swung wildly at nothing but empty air. Thomas stumbled past him, completely baffled that he missed a target who wasn't even moving. Derek dryly pointed out his failure, while Thomas apologized profusely for being so bad at this. He told the boy not to be sorry, but to be better. Thomas promised to never miss again. He attacked again with all his might, and promptly missed again. So much for making promises. Derek, looking bored, suggested a new weapon, but Thomas stubbornly insisted on using daggers. He reminded Thomas of their deal, ordering him to obey his command and pick up a spear. For several days, their training continued. Reyna blasted Derek while Thomas tried desperately to hit him. Reyna's attacks leveled up her wind skill, while Derek's magic resistance grew just by standing there. Thomas, however, was still struggling with daggers, managing to give Derek a single tiny scrap. He struggled a great deal, actually, fumbling his weapon while Derek facepalmed in the background. Oddly enough, the boy showed some impressive natural talent, with both the sword and the spear. Derek hunted beasts, letting Thomas get the final kills and giving Brandy hides to practice on. At night, they returned to the village, sharing laughter and food like a weird, dysfunctional family. Thomas's grandfather explained the boy's stubbornness, revealing his father had also used daggers. Meanwhile, Thomas excitedly boasted to his friend Brandy about how good he was getting at training. The grandfather sadly told Derek that the boy just wanted to be like his dead dad. After many days, Derek announced Thomas had finally reached level 10 and could choose a class. He wisely advised Thomas to pick the best class for him, not just the coolest sounding one. Thomas grinned with unearned confidence, promising that he totally understood the very important assignment. Thomas sat to choose his class while Derek waited, quietly hoping the boy wouldn't mess this up. Derek worriedly hoped the system would give him some good options after all his hard work. With a determined look, Thomas quickly reached out and made his final, fateful selection. A wave of energy erupted as he leaped up, proudly announcing to everyone that he was finished. Derek was surprised he chose so quickly, especially since he hadn't asked a single question. Thomas proudly showed off his new daggers, saying he found the perfect option right away. A feeling of intense and immediate dread washed over Derek as he realized what the boy had done. Thomas joyfully announced he picked the rogue class, just like his dad, as Derek's soul left his body. Derek's dark aura made Thomas flinch and drop a dagger, realizing he'd made a huge mistake. Thomas shamefully admitted there had been some rarer, much better options available to him. He explained he just remembered how cool his dad looked and couldn't help himself. Derek coldly reminded him that his father was dead and he was terrible with daggers. Derek turned away in disappointment, leaving Thomas to burst into tears over his foolish, sentimental choice. Thomas desperately grabbed Derek's leg, begging not to be abandoned because he had to get stronger. Derek questioned how he could ever trust him with secrets if he couldn't even follow instructions. The boy just pleaded with his tear-streaked face, looking absolutely pathetic and heartbroken. In a final desperate act, Thomas swore a binding and unbreakable oath on the great system itself. The system accepted the unbreakable vow, leaving Derek completely shocked by the boy's extreme solution. Derek realized this vow was a much harsher version of a contract from his old system. He asked Thomas if he was really that desperate, and the boy tearfully confirmed he was. Derek reluctantly agreed, but sternly warned him that this was his one and only strike. He told Thomas to get up so they could go prepare for his very first dungeon adventure. Far away, the pompous, noble Wallace Gracefall traveled by carriage toward a grand city. Inside, his companions complained and drank, while Wallace silently fumed over his recent public humiliation. One of his party members whined about having to return to the smelly, disgusting village. Another complained that he had only just washed the stench of peasants out of his hair. A woman hoped for a better welcoming party this time, as if they actually deserved one. The assassin Jeffrey seethed in silence, annoyed that this prick failed to secure any reinforcements. Wallace finally snapped, screaming at his annoying companions to shut their mouths for once. He promised them that in just a few days, this whole frustrating ordeal would be over. Back in the fields, Derek and Thomas arrived at a glowing, low-level dungeon entrance. Derek figured they could clear this level 25 dungeon twice, before his own level got too high. He thought this would be the perfect way to give Thomas some much-needed, near-death experience. Thomas looked at the dungeon core, completely confused about why they were even there. Derek just smiled mysteriously and told him they were going to complete it together. The boy pointed out the obvious level restriction, wondering how Derek planned to get inside. Derek reminded him of the secrets he swore to protect, saying he was about to see one. They both placed their hands on the glowing orb, officially registering as dungeon participants. The system revealed the shocking truth to Thomas. Derek was officially only level 18. Thomas was completely baffled, unable to believe the absurdly low number on the screen. The boy quickly realized the incredible strategic advantage this secret gave them for future training. He excitedly realized they could clear all the low-level dungeons without any trouble at all. Derek gave him a wicked grin, then crushed his hopes by saying he was just watching. He shoved Thomas into the portal, explaining there's no better training than fighting for your life. They appeared inside a dark, spooky cave with water slowly dripping from the high ceiling. At the entrance of an underground jungle, Derek casually asked if the kid was ready. Thomas nervously grabbed his arm, and Derek asked what he could possibly be scared of. He reminded Thomas that he had a brand new set of very expensive high-level daggers. He added that the sturdy armor Brandy made should protect him from almost anything in here. Derek joked that if Thomas got hurt, it was a great chance to level his healing skill. He called it a win-win situation, but Thomas was clearly not feeling the winning part. As they walked, Derek cheerfully promised this would be fun, ignoring the giant centipede lurking nearby. A giant wasp immediately landed on Thomas's head, and he understandably freaked out and fell. He then ran for his life as a giant blue beetle chased him through the jungle. A massive centipede then wrapped around him, squeezing the air from his tiny lungs. Thomas managed to stab a nearby monster while screaming for Derek to finally do something. In a flash, Derek appeared and sliced the monster in half, saving him at the last second. Thomas collapsed, asking what part of being mauled by giant bugs was supposed to be fun. Derek calmly told him to relax, since he technically didn't die. Thomas was not comforted. He winced in pain as Derek inspected his arm, crying that he thought it was broken. Derek used his healing skill, and a green glow instantly mended the boy's broken arm. Thomas flexed his perfectly healed arm in amazement, admitting that it felt much better now. Derek cheerfully clapped his shoulder and said it was time to get back out there. The boy stared in utter disbelief, not quite ready for round 2 of his near-death experiences. As Derek gave an encouraging thumbs up, Thomas decided his mentor was completely and utterly insane. He hid behind a bush, cautiously eyeing his next target, a giant, armored beetle. Taking a shaky breath, he told himself that he could totally do this. Maybe. Probably not. He burst from the bushes and charged at the beetle with a sudden surge of misplaced courage. The beetle noticed him at the last second, its giant eyes swiveling in surprise. Thomas swung his dagger with all his might, and completely missed the giant stationary bug. From the sidelines, Derek watched the clumsy attack with extreme second-hand embarrassment for his apprentice. The beetle swung its horn and sent Thomas flying through the air like a poorly thrown baseball. He hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind completely out of him. The massive beetle loomed over him, ready to finish the job. He was in big trouble. Derek yelled at him to dodge, and Thomas rolled just as the horn slammed down. He managed to slice off one of the beetle's legs, earning some rare praise from his mentor. The enraged beetle gathered a powerful energy and prepared to charge him down. It slammed into him, but Brandy's amazing armor held strong, saving him from the powerful impact. Thinking of Brandy, he grinned with renewed confidence and knew he could definitely win this. He dodged another attack and leaped onto the beetle's back, ready to end the fight. The beetle screeched in agony as he repeatedly stabbed it, causing yellow blood to spurt out. He relentlessly attacked its tough shell, finally managing to break through its thick, natural defenses. After the beetle collapsed, Thomas slumped to the ground, completely exhausted but finally victorious. Derek admitted that while it wasn't a pretty victory, it was definitely an improvement. He helped Thomas up and asked him to identify his first and most spectacular mistake. Thomas guessed he put too much power into his swing, which threw him off balance. Derek flatly told him he was wrong, explaining his mistake happened before he even attacked. He asked why the boy, a rogue, hadn't used his stealth skill. Thomas was completely baffled. The simple, obvious question short-circuited Thomas's brain as he tried to find a good answer. He stood in stunned silence as the magnitude of his foolish oversight finally began to hit him. He looked up with a nervous, sheepish smile, trying to think of a good excuse for his failure. With a cringe, he admitted the embarrassing truth. He simply forgot that he had it. Derek asked if he truly forgot the only skill from the class he chose against his advice. Thomas gritted his teeth and shamefully confirmed that yes, that is exactly what happened. Derek was utterly speechless, thinking to himself that this kid was almost unbelievably dumb. Meanwhile, back at the village, a fancy carriage was speeding towards the main gates. The carriage belonging to the Gracefall family came to an abrupt, arrogant halt outside. A guard on the wall called out, demanding that the new visitors identify themselves. A massive energy blast shattered the gate, sending the poor, unsuspecting guard flying. Wallace stood where the gate used to be, having made a very rude and dramatic entrance. Villagers ran out, wondering why those arrogant adventurers had bothered to come back again. Wallace announced that the lord of the nearby city had heard their desperate pleas for aid. With a twisted, malicious grin, he declared that they had arrived to save them all. Reyna stepped forward, her new weapon glowing as she prepared to reject his generous help. Surrounded by crackling energy, she informed him that they wanted none of his so-called assistance. She powerfully commanded Wallace and his ridiculous group of followers to leave her village immediately. Wallace's malicious grin only widened. He clearly had no intention of listening to her reasonable request. Far away in the dungeon, a new and unfortunate monster appeared. A level 18 spider ant. Thomas dodged a glowing red claw, his movements now much faster and more agile. After days in the dungeon, he had reached level 17 and felt much more confident. He declared he could handle one stupid bug and charged forward with a battle cry. He leaped onto the monster and plunged his dagger deep into its head. Covered in monster guts, he grinned triumphantly, celebrating his hard-earned victory. Derek suddenly shouted a warning from the sidelines, but Thomas was too busy celebrating. A second spider ant charged from behind the first, catching the boy completely by surprise. He panicked, realizing his dagger was stuck deep inside the first monster's corpse. The new monster lunged at the defenseless boy, who could only scream for help. Derek intervened in a flash, slicing the monster in half and saving his apprentice again. Thomas sat dejectedly on the ground, annoyed that things had been going so well. He realized if he'd had a longer weapon, he could have pulled it free. He finally admitted to himself that he wasn't cut out for daggers, and chose the wrong class. As Derek effortlessly retrieved the dagger, Thomas knew his mentor was right, as always. Derek healed his minor injuries and told him he was becoming a whole new fighter. With a confident smirk, Derek announced that Thomas was finally ready for the boss. They arrived at a massive temple crackling with lightning, the dungeon's final area. Derek reminded him of the simple plan: use stealth and go for the head. He dramatically opened the huge stone doors, bathing the entrance in a bright light. A bolt of energy shot out, and Derek instantly created a shield to protect them. The boss, a terrifying mantis warrior, made Thomas doubt he could win. Derek's eyes glowed as he announced a change of plans to keep things simple. He dashed into the room at incredible speed, surrounded by crackling blue energy. He leaped onto the giant mantis and wrestled it to the ground with ease. With his eyes glowing, he manifested a spear of pure energy to pin the beast. He slammed the spear through the boss's chest, pinning it firmly to the floor. Standing over the immobilized monster, he told Thomas it was all up to him now. Thomas nodded with grim determination, his fear replaced by pure focus. He drove his dagger straight into the boss's head, hitting its weak point perfectly. The boss dissolved, leaving behind the glowing reward core and signaling their victory. The system announced their triumphant victory over the dungeon boss with a fancy crown. Thomas cheered that he finally cleared his first dungeon and could escape this hell. Derek dryly congratulated him, then helpfully reminded him it only gets harder from here. He decided against another run, saying Thomas was too slow, and his granny was probably worried. Thomas silently stared at his dagger, which was still stuck in the boss's corpse. Derek noticed him struggling and asked what he was doing, already knowing the answer. Thomas admitted the knife was stuck and kicked the corpse in frustration. He received his reward for clearing the dungeon, a new cure toxin skill. He also unlocked an achievement, earning 2 extra skill points for his efforts. Outside the dungeon, Derek asked if he was ready to head back to the village. Thomas finally admitted Derek was right about daggers, and promised to change his class. Pleased, Derek offered him a great spear from a previous owner who didn't need it anymore. Thomas's excitement was cut short as Derek's expression suddenly turned grim and alarmed. Arriving at the village, Derek noted the strange absence of guards at the gate. He recognized the fancy carriages and realized with dread exactly who had returned to visit. Derek broke into a desperate sprint toward the village, with Thomas running right behind him. He burst through the broken gates, his energy spear already formed, screaming for his friends. He found Brandy first, lying on the ground, thankfully just unconscious. Nearby, her mother Mallory was in critical condition with only minutes left to live. Thomas ran in behind him, completely shocked by the horrifying scene of destruction. Derek immediately began healing them both, reassuring Thomas that they would be fine. He placed a hand on the boy's head, ordering him to stay put and out of trouble. A terrified Thomas asked his mentor where he was going with that murderous look. Surrounded by a furious purple aura, Derek said he was going to find who did this. In the square, a defiant Reyna was on her knees, impaled by a sword. Wallace declared it was her fault for refusing to give up Derek's location. He sadistically sentenced her to death for the crime of disobeying his noble ass. One of his men raised a sword to execute her as she braced for the end. A massive blade of void energy appeared, blocking the sword as Derek's voice echoed. His blood-streaked face appeared, reminding the terrified noble of his earlier promise. Derek's void energy erupted as he promised to kill every last one of them. A terrified Wallace frantically ordered his followers to kill the man immediately. One of his companions lunged at Derek, screaming that he was going to die. Derek swung his spear in a blur, brutally swatting her out of the air. Her body hit the ground with a lifeless thud, the fight over before it began. The woman's blonde sister screamed in horror and disbelief at what she just witnessed. Her grief turned to rage and she swore the peasant would pay for his actions. She gathered a massive fireball, promising to burn him completely to ashes. The huge explosion rocked the village square, scattering the frightened onlookers. She panted, whispering that her violent act of revenge was for her sister. Wallace stared into the flames, cautiously asking if she had actually managed to kill him. 2 glowing purple eyes appeared in the fire, proving he was perfectly fine. He walked out of the inferno completely unharmed, shattering her last hope with a single word. Wallace panicked, screaming at his remaining, very useless followers to do something already. An archer on a nearby rooftop took aim and fired an arrow at Derek. Derek casually snatched the arrow out of the air an inch from his face. The archer stared in absolute terror, realizing he was fighting a literal monster. He decided he wasn't being paid enough for this and turned to run for his life. Derek flicked the arrow back, and it flew straight into the fleeing archer's forehead. The man's body tumbled from the roof, his escape plan having failed spectacularly. Richard pushed through the crowd trying to get to Derek before he did something worse. He desperately pleaded with him to stop, reminding him that attacking nobles was a death sentence. Derek coldly reminded the old man that they had already been given their chance to leave. With Thomas reflected in his glowing eyes, he declared that their chance was now gone. The last of Wallace's men foolishly charged at Derek with his sword raised. Derek simply raised his bare hand, stopping the steel blade with a flash of purple light. The men stared in shock, unable to believe his sword was stopped by an empty hand. Derek's hand, crackling with void energy, tightened its grip on the weapon's blade. The sword shattered into pieces, and Derek walked past the utterly defeated man. Wallace cursed his followers, calling them all completely useless as he stood alone. Wallace roared, unleashing a torrent of energy to show him true noble power. He screamed that he would demonstrate the superiority of his noble bloodline. Derek stood with his back to him, unimpressed as a much scarier purple aura grew. With a cold smile, he whispered 2 words, preparing to unleash his own power. A blinding explosion of void energy completely annihilated Wallace's pathetic light show. Derek appeared directly in front of Wallace before the noble could even react. He lifted him by the throat, and Wallace immediately started begging for his life. Derek coldly agreed that he would never see him again, which was not very reassuring. Wallace choked, his life flashing before his eyes as Derek's grip tightened. Sudden threatened to kill Richard if Derek didn't release the noble. The blonde pyromancer held Richard hostage, but the old man urged Derek to let him go. Richard explained that the punishment for killing nobles was far too severe to risk. Derek paused, his expression unreadable as he considered the new, annoying development. The woman sneered, ordering him to obey her command like a good little dog. Richard pleaded, warning that the entire village could be executed for their involvement. She screamed her final demand, ordering him to drop Wallace at that very moment. A bloody sword blade suddenly burst through the woman's chest from behind her. Leon, the former chief, stood behind her with a look of grim determination. He declared that a chieftain's duty is to protect his people, no matter the cost. He let her body fall, his shocking act of defiance saving the hostage. With the distraction gone, Derek turned his full, murderous attention back to Wallace. He calmly asked if Wallace would swear not to retaliate against the village. The terrified noble immediately swore he would, pathetically begging for his life. Derek said that was good, then prepared to deliver his final judgment. With a quick, brutal twist, he snapped the noble's neck with a sickening crunch. Richard stared in absolute horror, realizing what his friend had just done. He whispered that Derek had doomed them all as Wallace's body hit the dirt. Derek stood over the corpse and joked that his hand must have slipped. Whoops. He then calmly walked over to where Raina lay bleeding on the ground. His rage finally faded as he gently lifted her head, checking if she was still alive. He carefully lifted the unconscious and badly wounded Raina into his arms. He carried her through the devastated village as the survivors whispered in fear and awe. Leon helped Richard up, but the old man could only say that Derek had doomed them all. The villagers watched in stunned silence, their faces reflecting the grim uncertainty of their new future. Derek disappeared into the chief's residence, leaving the terrified villagers to their thoughts. Leon rallied the others, telling them they had a lot of cleaning up to do. The villagers began the grim task of clearing the bodies and debris from their homes. Inside, Derek laid Raina by the fire and sat a silent, lonely watch over her. The fire crackled warmly, casting a soft glow on Raina's peaceful, sleeping face. A series of system notifications popped up, informing him of an unexpected level up. He cursed, realizing his plan to run low-level dungeons with Thomas was now completely ruined. He groaned, thinking he must be the only person alive who gets mad about leveling up. A weak voice called his name, pulling him from his frustrating thought. Raina was awake and immediately asked if her village was safe. Derek gently pushed her back down, calmly reassuring her that everyone was okay. She collapsed back in relief, whispering a sincere thank you for his help. Derek sarcastically claimed he did nothing, and the nobles just spontaneously died. It was weird. Raina grabbed his wrist, urgently reminding him that killing nobles was a serious crime. She warned him that if anyone found out, the entire village would be executed. He gently told her the only solution was to make sure no one ever found out. He added that he had a plan, and the villagers would keep quiet if they knew what was good for them. Leon entered with the rest of their small group, gathering them for a meeting. He reported the nobles, bodies were hidden, and the carriage drivers had sworn binding oaths. Derek thanked Leon for his efficiency, planning to hide the bodies in his storage bracelet. Richard slumped in a chair, saying he saw no way out of this terrible mess. He lamented that if only Derek had let Wallace live, but Derek just told him not to worry. Derek announced that he had a plan to save them, but he couldn't do it alone. He told the small group that he would need every one of them to help. He then corrected himself, his expression turning even more serious. He declared he would need the help of the entire village to pull this off. Derek asked Richard for a timeline, who guessed they had a few days to a few weeks. Derek grimly decided they would just have to hope for the best-case scenario. He laid out the first step, a village meeting to explain the official, fake story. Raina would announce that the nobles arrived, got a map from Richard, and left. She would stress that they were barely in the village. That was the whole story. Derek apologized to Richard for sacrificing his map, but Richard agreed it was a small price. Next, he announced that he would need a binding oath from everyone in the room. Leon looked shocked and asked why they would need to swear such an oath. Derek explained it was the same vow of secrecy that Thomas had already taken. Leon refused, stating he would not subject himself to such a binding vow. Richard agreed, saying he would also prefer not to swear an oath if possible. Raina asked if he could keep the village safe if she agreed to swear it. He promised to do his best, and with that, Raina agreed to take the oath. Mallory said she didn't need an oath to protect her friends, but would swear if asked. Brandy declared that if Thomas could do it, then she could do it too. Derek offered a rare, genuine thank you to the three women for their trust. He respected the men's choice, inviting them to stay and listen to the plan anyway. The system confirmed the binding oaths, sealing the trust of his new inner circle. Raina smirked, now fully on board, and asked him to finally reveal his plan. Derek returned her smirk, happy that she had finally asked him what he had in mind. His plan was a heroic tale, where Wallace graciously received a map from Richard. The noble hero then led his team to the dangerous level 100 dungeon. There, they valiantly fought monsters to stop the dungeon's threatening overflow. Their efforts successfully stopped the disease that had been spreading from the dungeon. Unfortunately, the rest of his heroic team was wiped out by the dungeon's monsters. Wallace himself barely escaped after being fatally wounded by the powerful dungeon boss. He gave the ultimate sacrifice, dying as a celebrated hero who saved the region. Derek finished with a grin, stating this would be the official story after his plan. The group stared back, completely stunned by the sheer audacity of his fabricated tale. Later, the core group stood ready, packed for a multi-day trip away from the village. Raina questioned why they were going to a level 50 dungeon, not the level 100 one. Derek explained they would go there later, once they were all a bit stronger. He reminded them that while their help was welcome, he could still do this alone. He also admitted he wanted to test a theory about how the system assigns classes. He glanced at Brandy, thinking her unique experiences might unlock a very special class. Mallory was still confused, asking why they were clearing dungeons while he just waited. He gave her a charming wink and told her to trust him, which was not reassuring. He promised to, quote, hand-feed them kills to speed things up, which just confused them more. With the plan mostly not explained, Derek prepared to get them all moving. He suddenly scooped Brandy onto his back, much to her complete and utter surprise. He then broke into a sprint, yelling, "Let's go," while everyone else complained about the running. The group ran down a long, winding path, leaving the safety of the village far behind. They arrived at the dungeon, with most of the party completely out of breath. As Thomas wobbled, Mallory yelled at him for making her feel like jelly. Derek announced it was time for his oath-takers to learn why they swore the vow. The three women placed their hands on the dungeon core along with Derek. The system displayed their levels, revealing Derek was only level 30. Raina stared in shock, unable to understand how his level could be lower than hers. Derek chuckled, confirming this was why he needed their oaths. He promised to explain someday. He activated the portal, and the system began its countdown to enter the dungeon. They appeared inside a small, dusty safe house, a refuge within the dungeon itself. Derek cautiously peeked outside before turning back to address the group. Inside, he gathered them together to finally explain his brilliant power leveling strategy. His genius plan involved him going out and beating monsters nearly to death. He would then drag the monsters back for Thomas and Mallory to finish up. He told Thomas to remember, no more dagger classes. Thomas looked extremely annoyed. He informed Raina that she was strong enough to actually fight alongside him. If she got into trouble, however, she was to run back to the safe house. Brandy eagerly asked what her very important job was going to be in all this. He smiled and told her she would be doing absolutely nothing, crushing her spirit. He quickly added she would also be practicing on a whole lot of monster hides. He then turned to Mallory and asked if that flimsy spear was her best weapon. She explained that with a common class she was left with the village's scraps. Derek just smiled and activated his glowing storage bracelet. He dumped a huge pile of amazing, high-quality weapons onto the floor. Mallory stared in shock, wondering how he could possibly possess such an arsenal. He casually said he'd collected them over the years but never really used them. He offered her a sleek, advanced spear that was perfect for her fighting style. He demonstrated its features, accidentally shooting energy bolts all over the small room. Thomas tried to grab a dagger, but was pulled back by Derek's firm grip. The boy started to ask for daggers but was silenced by his mentor's death glare. With everyone newly equipped, Derek and Raina prepared to head out and fight. They were immediately met by a horde of angry, demonic-looking beastmen. The monsters snarled, their red eyes glowing as they prepared to charge the pair. Derek cracked his knuckles and told Raina that this was going to be fun. With a terrifying roar, the massive horde of beastmen charged them down. Raina and Derek leaped into battle, a blur of blue and purple energy. Derek landed a devastating punch, completely crushing a monster's skull with one hit. He then dragged a dazed and beaten monster back to the safe house for the others. Thomas pointed a weird energy gun at it, quoting some ancient dramatic movie line. Brandy snatched the gun, scolding Thomas for taking it and trying to give it back. Outside, Raina continued to fight with skill, her glowing sword cutting through monsters. Derek sat on a pile of defeated beasts, congratulating Raina on her good work. Thomas and Mallory delivered the final blows to the last of the weakened monsters. They both cheered, announcing they had finally reached the level 25 milestone. Derek clapped, telling them to now carefully consider all their new class options. He gave Thomas a look, who smirked and said he knew what to do. Thomas excitedly announced he had been offered a rare class called Soul Spear. He explained the class focused on piercing damage and could extend his spear's reach, but a shadow of doubt crossed his face as he thought of his father again. Brandy gently reassured him that his father would be with him no matter what. Mallory announced she was offered an uncommon growth class called Ohm's Fury. It focused on strength and crushing blows, and she asked if she should take it. Derek smiled, pleased that his plan was working and everyone was progressing so well. He reflected that sometimes, all people need to thrive is a little outside help. He then opened his own system window, curious about his own level progression. The system confirmed he had also reached the level 25 class upgrade milestone. He grinned, realizing he could finally upgrade his epic Champion of the Void class.